Did you expect any of this to happen?
No, I honestly, RJ, I remember reading about podcasts when I first started because I was like, okay, that's like an easy-ish way to start.
We've all seen what it's like to survive in a digital-first world. Now it's time we thrive in it. I created this show to bring you expert insights to help you and your business grow in this new era. Welcome to the Evoke Media Show.
All right. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Evoke Media Show. Today, my guest is Bryan. Kate is an Emmy-nominated producer, writer, and storyteller. She is the founder of One Girl Revolution and host of the One Girl Revolution podcast, a multimedia platform that highlights the stories of everyday women and girls who are changing the world through their lives. One Girl Revolution's short documentary, The Girl Inside, which is awesome, was just nominated for an Emmy Award in Outstanding Achievement in Human Interest. Kate has a PR and media background, which led her to start One Girl Revolution as a way to tell the stories that are so often ignored and marginalized. Welcome to the show, Kate Bryan.
RJ, thank you for having me. Thank you so much. This is exciting.
Absolutely. So as a very first forefront, before we get into anything, the Emmys are on December 5th, and you were up for a nomination for your short documentary, which is on YouTube. We're going to link that in the show notes. But it is fantastic. And part of what I wanted to bring you on for is because you have this skill and history of telling stories that not everyone would necessarily be willing to tell. Just tell me about that. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So as you said, RJ, my background's in PR and media, and I actually spent almost 7 years working in Washington, D.C., running press for numerous organizations and companies. And when I moved back to Michigan about 3 years ago, I started realizing that there were so many stories that weren't being told. And then when I started looking at specifically women and girls and their stories, I felt like so often they were divisive or politicized instead of just getting to the heart of what women are and what they stand for. And so it sort of has been a little bit of, the way that I describe it is like pulling a thread, because I felt like, okay, I see there are stories that need to be told, but I don't really know how to tell them. I'm only one person. How do I do a documentary? How do I do a documentary series? Should I start with a podcast? So it started as a podcast because I felt like that was a quote unquote easy way to tell these stories. It definitely has been an uphill battle, and I've had to learn a lot along the way. But now we have over 130 episodes of the podcast. And then the short documentary, as you mentioned, The Girl Inside, that really sparked out of a partnership between me and a friend who owns a production company. And I stumbled upon this story of a professor, Dr. Laura Biaggi, who taught a storytelling class within Cook County Jail. And what's crazy about that, RJ, is even people in PR and media, reporters, anybody who's in the creative space, they know that it's so difficult to get clearance first of all, to just go into a jail, right? Like you have to have some purpose, you have to go visit people, whatever. You have to have some reason to be in there. And I decided that I was going to somehow figure out a way to take a film crew in. And so it took us almost a year of tons of back and forth between the jail and the women and Dr. Biaggi, and there was so much red tape that we had to cross over. But then the Girl Inside happened. We spent a day within Cook County Jail, still not knowing, like from a creative standpoint, I think it's always interesting because you don't really know oftentimes what you're going to get. You know, you can write a script, but you don't know exactly what's going to happen, especially when you're working with non-actors, which we were just trying to tell authentic stories. And so the platform continues to grow through the podcast, and then The Girl Inside, hopefully the Emmy Awards, hopefully we win the Emmy, but even just being nominated is something that I never could have fathomed. And then, spoiler alert, we actually have a second documentary that will hopefully be coming out in the next month or two. So
that is incredibly exciting. So from something that started as a podcast, I mean, right now you're in kind of this very exciting, tumult of like you've got an Emmy nomination, you've got a second documentary on the way. I saw you announced a book that will be coming soon, but it started as a podcast. Did you expect any of this to happen?
No, I honestly, RJ, I remember reading about podcasts when I first started because I was like, okay, that's like an easy-ish way to start. You know, I can cold call people. I can do interviews over the phone. I don't necessarily have to be in studio, as cool as that would be. I can use Zoom. It's kind of an easier, I guess, medium to highlight these stories. And I had read an article talking about how the majority of podcasts only do 7 episodes because it is a lot of work and it's a lot of coordination. And then you have to edit, you know, even once you do the interview, you have to do a lot of prep beforehand, then you do the interview, and then you have to get into like editing, and then you have to put it up on social media and promotion. And there's a lot of facets. But I remember reading this article where it said that the majority of podcasts only do 7 episodes. And then they get burnt out and then they stop. And so there are all these podcasts all over all the different platforms that we use to listen to podcasts that haven't even surpassed 7 episodes. So I remember sitting down and being like, okay, if I can just find 10 really interesting stories and just do a 10 episode series, that's 10 stories that maybe haven't been covered by the media or maybe haven't been covered by the media in this very authentic way. That's what I love about podcasts and even conversations like this is just creating the space for real conversations to happen, for real stories to be told. And so I started out with the 10 episodes and then took like 2 weeks off for Christmas. And then I just jumped right in. And now I feel like I blinked. So in some capacity, it feels like it's been a very long journey, like it's been 10 years. But then on the other hand, it feels like I blinked and now we're at over 130 episodes. So, I mean, my advice to anybody who's like listening, not that you asked for it, but like just start small. I think a lot of times when, especially in the creative space, we think that we have to do something really big, like, you know, start a whole video series. Like that's what I really wanted to do with One Girl at the beginning was do a whole video series, but I figured out a way to start small and just have little by little chipped away at all the different hopes and dreams that I have for One Girl.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, starting small from the perspective of you started with a podcast, not also turning it into a YouTube series and trying to make a blog out of it and trying to do, I think a lot of people start getting that like grand action when they're trying to start something new. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I'm going to do all these things and get it everywhere and it's going to blow up and it's going to be great. And they do like 2 episodes and they're so overwhelmed and they quit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you're a visionary, you know, and you know that too. It's like, it's hard when you're a creative person because you have all these ideas. And I feel like a lot of times our ideas are all happening at the same time. Like you meant, like even the past 2 weeks of my life, I feel like have been pure insanity. And I'm just like, everything's happening all at the same time. And then on top of that, I have all these other like new things that I'm working on and the next documentary. And then, you know, I have this idea for a creative collaborative space in the city of Detroit that I'm like in the midst of. And so, you know, it's never going to be perfect and it's never going to be relaxing, especially when you're a creative person. But I think, you know, picking one thing and being like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it well. And then kind of little by little evolving from there and saying like, okay, I'm going to start with a podcast and then we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll branch into a blog or have a blog that kind of accompanies the podcast. And then, I had this idea for a video, which is really how One Girl has evolved too. You know, having this short documentary instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do a weekly video series and kind of taking that on. It's like, no, I'm going to have one really powerful standalone piece. Once we finish that, now it's like, okay, let's have another second standalone piece. It's really powerful and inspiring. And then we can build off of that.
Yeah. How has running a series like this developed you as a person? Like, what have you learned along the way from Kate, you know, a year plus ago when you first started the show to Kate now? What has that journey been like?
Such a good question, RJ. I feel like I have grown so much in so many different ways. You know, like I said, I had this PR background. And so for many years, I would say 10 plus years, because even prior to being in DC, I was working in Dublin, Ireland, and doing PR over there, doing communications and press. So I really had like 10 plus years of PR before I even started One Girl. And one thing about public relations and often like the kind of the background media positions, which I was in, you're so used to being in the background. And so then flipping the switch and being like, okay, now I have to be in the forefront. Now I have to be the one who is asking the questions. Now I have to be the one who is doing Instagram videos. And I think a lot of times that can be such a huge like uphill battle and learning curve. And like all of us kind of, I mean, I definitely have struggled with like, I don't want to be the one. Like, why me? Like, why do I have to be the one? Can't somebody else stand up and do it? But really learning to find my voice in a new way and finding the facets of my story, because there are so many, obviously I have my own personal viewpoints on things. I have my own, personal things that I believe and stand for and things that I've worked on in the past, but like learning how to have my own voice in this platform, but then also being okay to just be quiet and let women speak and share their stories in an authentic way. And so there's definitely a line to be straddling that I've learned a lot. I've learned how to step forward, and then I've also learned how to straddle this line where I don't want it to be the Kate Bryan show. I want it to be the show for all these women, and I want to work with them. I think it's been really cool to see my PR background and everything that I've done in the past, coaching people to do media interviews, and see that play out now in these podcast interviews where a lot of times I'm interviewing women that have never told their story before or never have done an interview. I interviewed someone the other day who had never done a podcast interview or any interview before. And so really learning how to empower these women and using my gifts and talents throughout the years to do that. And then being willing to take chances. I think a lot of times as a creative person, it can feel very isolating where you feel like, am I the only one who cares? And even the documentary, The Girl Inside, as it was happening, there were so many people that were like, Kate, I can't believe you left your bougie career in DC to like move back to Detroit of all places. I love the city of Detroit. Anybody that knows me knows that I love the city of Detroit so much. But there are so many people that were just befuddled by that. Like, why would you do that? And then next thing I'm like, I'm taking a film crew into Cook County Jail. And people were like, why would you do that? Like, that's weird. And then I did the documentary and people kind of were like, okay, that's interesting. And now with the Emmys, it's like, wow, okay, you're legitimate. Like it legitimizes things, but sometimes we're the only ones that see our vision. We see the potential for what something could become. And sometimes it doesn't turn into what we hope or what we expect. But sometimes, and The Girl Inside is a great example, it turns into something bigger and better than we ever could have fathomed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in today's world, I always get nervous whenever we talk about, online success, because so many people focus on things like follower count, on subscribers, on very vanity-based metrics. And that's not really the point. You can drastically change the course of your career, your business, with putting something out that really only a few hundred people are watching. If you like 1,000 people tuning in on a monthly basis, like that is bigger than it sounds. Mm-hmm. And I think people dismiss that of thinking you need millions of people. You don't.
Right. And
putting something, please.
I was going to say, like, sometimes, we see so much success. Like, we see this overnight success where you're like, how does that person have 1 million followers? Or like, what did that person do to get 1 million followers? And then here I am, like, schlepping along, trying to, build this platform. And it's exhausting. But the reality is, there are always going to be overnight successes, right? Like, TikTok is a great example. So many people have found massive success just from like some silly little TikTok dance video that they made. And so there are always going to be those kind of stories, but the majority of people, even online, they worked so hard to get to where they are. They had a vision for something. And so I think it's reminding ourselves that it's not like an overnight success. What is that saying? Like an overnight success, like takes 10 years or something. Or 5 years, and there are different metrics there. But also to your point, for me, like I've always just refocused myself on One Girl Revolution. Because like I look at The Girl Inside and it has over 4,000 views on YouTube. It has like over 700 views, I think, on Facebook. And in my mind, everybody should be watching it. It's so powerful. It's 10 minutes. Why doesn't it have 1 million views? But one thing that I've always challenged myself on with every step of the way, and when the night before The Girl Inside came out, I sat down and I was like, how do I determine success for this one project? Like tomorrow it comes out. I've been working for 2 years at that point on this specific video, this 10-minute video. What happens? Like, what is success to me? And to me, it was if this documentary, this video touches one person's life, opens one person's eyes, helps one person to see the marginalized people that are the incarcerated population, and helps them to see their humanity. That is success to me. And RJ, as you know, that has happened time and time again. So many people, that little documentary has opened so many people's eyes. And my biggest hope for the Emmys too is the same thing. Like, what's success with regards to the Emmys? I would love to win. I would love for The Girl Inside to win the Emmy. But to me, just the fact that it is going to be shown in front of all these people, and the name The Girl Inside is going to pop up there, and One Girl Revolution, because I think also the Emmys elevate all the other stories, all the other hundreds of women that we've featured on One Girl Revolution. But success to me is that it opens people's eyes and gets people to see it. And so whether or not we win, it's already a success in my eyes.
Absolutely. So really quick, like from the PR background side of things, I don't have a PR background, but I always kind of looked at public relations as like managing public perception. Like often it gets like they're putting out fires, but there's a lot more that goes into it. But from, someone looking at how they're presenting themselves online or just in today's era, how does something like this, a podcast, a series, like some sort of platform, tie into just building that image, or like really giving the opportunity to have something that you can own and control, that you can share with the world? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think public relations, I think there's a lot of confusion when it comes to PR. People think like, the One Girl Revolution was on Good Morning America, and people were like, how did you get that? Like, how did you get that? Like, you're a PR genius. You got it. And I was like, ultimately, I just asked. Like, that's all I did. And I just found an email address and I emailed them, and I had a good pitch, which ultimately was a couple of sentences just about what One Girl Revolution is and what it stands for and what we're trying to do. And I think that's all of us, right? Like, you look at your social media, it doesn't have to be an organization. It doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be Good Morning America, but we all are kind of our own PR agents in a way. We're the ones who are putting things out into the world, even what we share, even what articles you share on Facebook. People are making decisions about who you are as a person, whether or not they're right. Because I think social media can also be dangerous there, where we can make up a straw man or say that somebody is a way that we think they are when we actually don't know them. But I think on the flip side, social media can be so positive, where we actually have the power to share with other people, share our stories. And I think there is so much power in storytelling. And so, yeah, I encourage everybody to kind of see yourself as your own PR agent and be like, okay, how am I presenting myself to the world through my Instagram, through my social media? I've had so many conversations with people even recently, and I will tell you, with specifically single people who share a lot about their personal lives on Instagram and simultaneously are trying to get new business. And to me, that's always a danger zone. It's like, okay, don't share too much, or, keep it G-rated or keep it PG. Yeah. Don't share too many details. And so not kind of overthinking it, but just being like, okay, what is this presenting to the world? Everything that you post, and just because even like from a business standpoint, RJ, like people are going to look at different things that you post personally, and they're going to be like, okay, do I really want that person doing my business relations or video, or do I really want to be on this person's podcast because they posted this really harsh thing? Or so I think it's good to be thoughtful about it, and you just never know who you can touch. I see it as a very positive thing that we have social media, and even media. I think that there is so much power there to highlight stories that aren't often told.
I could not agree more. Kate, it has been outstanding having you on the show. So something I would love to do is actually giving you the last word here. So for anyone who's watching or listening, what is a piece of wisdom, advice, encouragement that you would like to share with them?
RJ, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This has been so awesome, and it's just always great to spend time with you. But to everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening, I would just say, find out who you are and who you were meant to be. I'm a firm believer that we are as unique as our fingerprints. And if you forget that, look at your fingerprint and remember that there is no one else who has that same fingerprint as you. And you have a responsibility and an opportunity to leave an imprint on the world. I love that visualization. And sometimes I have to stop in the midst of my chaotic life. And I think all of us can relate to that, how chaotic and crazy life gets, and look at my fingerprint and think about that. What is my role in the world? What is my opportunity in the world? And for all the creatives out there, if you have an idea, if you have a dream, just do it, go for it. And you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to, have this massive organization or something to make a difference. Sometimes it's in the little things. And I could tell you, or I could send you videos, RJ, of my first couple of podcast episodes or my first couple of interviews with people. And it is shoddy. It is crazy, but I just jumped in and I did it. And so I just would encourage anybody who is creative or just has an idea to go for it.